Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club, where we're reading the book Set on Fire, with permission from the author, Taurus Montgomery, a young and successful SDA pastor with a commitment to serving the youth of this generation. The story is an autobiography of his life, where as a child, he grew up in the hood in Mobile, Alabama. In our first reading, we covered the foreword by his brother Powell, an introduction by the author himself, and the first 3 chapters of the book. We learned of Taurus's first close call at age 14, where he found himself with one of his homeboys and an older man from the neighborhood, and a gun in his hand, on an assignment to murder a woman, the wife of the older man, whom they had never seen. With the gun in his homeboy's hand, they made their way up to the apartment door and knocked. Taurus was so scared he could have peed himself, and he wondered how he had gotten himself into this mess. What if he was caught? What if he was sent to prison for murder? What if? By the grace of God, no one answered the door. What a close call. He never hung out with those 2 guys again. He learned how powerful peer pressure was, and that it could compel you to do things that were so dumb and foolish with such grave consequences. In chapter 2, we learn that although they lived in the hood, Taurus and his family lived in a big house, the biggest in the hood, making his peers look up to him, respect him, admire him, and give him clout among them, and let them think that he was living big. He enjoyed every minute of it. In the 3rd chapter, he gave us a tour of the big house, where we saw that the truth was very different from the outside appearance. In this chapter, we learned of his love for his mama, and his anger, annoyance, and frustration at his father for the way he often abused her. Because he was such a disciplinarian, however, Taurus could not take out his anger on him. Remember, friends, you can purchase your copy of this exciting book at the author's website, taurusmontgomery.com. That's TAURUSMONTGOMERY, taurusmontgomery.com, and read along with us as we pick up the story today with chapter 4, entitled Hoodology. As I was coming up, it always seemed like I was learning. If it wasn't from school, it was the hood. The influences of the hood are very powerful. Junior, see you. NWA rapped about it. Boys in the hood popularized it. South Central magnified it. Menace to society glorified it. Don't be a menace to society while drinking your juice in the hood joked about it. And the media often demonized it. Some call it the trap. Others say it's the ghetto. Webster pronounces it as a neighborhood. But where I'm from, we call it the hood. In my hood, you're likely to meet people like LaToya. She's pretty, tall, thin, gifted, and she was strung out on crack at the age of 17. Meet Al. He was the greatest athlete that never was, because he let alcohol get the best of him. BMO was shot and killed down the street from his house over some rims. He was 18. And LJ, he was shot in the back and left to die on the sidewalk. He's grateful to be alive, although he's paralyzed. In my hood, you will also find crackheads that are great salesmen. They sell anything and everything, all for the low low. When I say anything, I mean just that. One time, a guy named Shack Daddy tried to sell my father a frozen fish. Not a bag of frozen fish, but one small frozen fish. Things like that happened in my hood all the time. I was born and raised in Mobile, Alabama, a city that is proud to be known for hosting college football's Senior Bowl, proud of being the hometown of baseball legend Hank Aaron, and proud of its lively Mardi Gras tradition. But during the early 90s, my middle school years, Mobile was not proud of the number of black youth getting killed during Mardi Gras from gang-related, hood-related violence. Young African-American men were getting killed left and right, usually over drugs and money. While driving home one evening, we passed by a large vacant lot. We drove by this same lot often because it was so close to our home. But this night it was different. It was flooded with MPD police cars, ATF trucks, army jeeps, and dozens of cops loading their guns. It was like they were preparing for war. You see, the night before, there was a riot in the Roger Williams projects. The gunshots sounded like a 4th of July showcase. Members of the Blood Gang destroyed a police precinct with fire. Their retaliation was in response to the shooting of one of their gang members by a Mobile police officer. These types of tragedies and others eventually led to something else that made the city less proud. Mobile received national publicity because of its homicide rate during those days. I recall sitting in front of the television, watching the evening news, when Tom Brokaw reported that we ranked 3rd on the list for most homicides in America for that particular year. Major cities like Miami, Los Angeles, Philly, and the like crowded the list. So this was an alarming ranking for a relatively small city, approximately 200,000 people. While the city wasn't proud, believe it or not, T-ville was. That's my hood. The next day at school, the report from the evening news was the hottest topic. It seemed like everyone had watched the news that night. It was something bragged about. For my peers and me, it was validation that down here in Mobile, we don't play because we're some real hood and eggs. We felt like we're on the map now. Now, obviously, this is not the wisest way to understand such alarming statistics. But this kind of thinking is nearly automatic for young minds consumed with Hollywood movies that promote violence as acceptable, gangster rap videos that endorse retaliation as the only way to settle disputes, and rap songs that make violence and rejecting authority seem cool. Furthermore, when you're young and your everyday surrounding includes crackheads, crack houses, and drug dealers, and when every other night you go to sleep to the sound of gunshots, and when you attend a school that is poorly funded and filled with some teachers who care more about their salary than your success, such twisted thinking should not be surprising. Nevertheless, like Ty Tribbett, I believe there is some good in the hood. Growing up in the hood has some advantages as well as disadvantages. The truth of the matter is that whatever environment you live in can have both good and bad influences on your life perspective. And growing up in the hood has taught me a lot of good. I learned early about the meaning of cause and effect, that your choices have consequences. I witnessed many good people destroy their lives and devastate their families because of their choice to smoke crack. The hood also taught me how to hoop, play basketball, how to quickly recognize danger and react accordingly, how to read people, and how to survive. The hood has given me a resolve to be resilient. Because of this, I will spend the rest of my life trying to give back and encourage others who have made it out to do the same. Hood 101. While I'm grateful for the good the hood has taught me, the reality is that it's not all good in the hood. Looking back, I realize how hard it can be raising kids in the hood. My hat goes off to the parents who have been successful at it. My heart goes out to those parents who haven't. There are 3 particular lessons that I wish I did not learn and have had to unlearn. Lesson number 1. The hood has a way of persuading you to believe that appearance is everything. From the shoes on your feet to the shoes on your ride, if it ain't tight, it ain't right. You dress to impress, to outshine the rest. Or you'll be talked about and called a hot mess. I'm not knocking the desire to have some of the finer things in life. I'm just saying that looking good is not the most important thing in life. For example, when I was in high school at John L. LaFleur, once the bell rang, everyone knew a car show was about to happen. If you had a tight ride, this was your opportunity to stunt with it. I will never forget the day when I saw this guy cruising slowly at 5 miles per hour in a lime green old school Cutlass. It had green and white leather seats, fancy rims, and some 15 inches in the trunk. His head was bobbing to the beats. He was stunting hard. But then, his car began smoking from under the hood like a chimney. He came to a halt and held up traffic. He had to get out, push it out of the street, pop the hood, and try to fix his car, while some in the crowd pointed and laughed. My point? Just because it sparkles, don't make it a diamond. His car reminds me of my house. I showed you the inside, but my friends didn't have a clue. In love with people's praise, I believed that if I kept my appearance tight, everything else would be all right. So I kept up with the latest fashion. A fresh pair of J's on my feet. It did not matter whether I had to steal to get them or not. It was a must. I got my ears pierced and bought some fat fake diamond studs to sit upon my lobes. With an outgoing personality a level of charisma and good athletic ability, from the outside looking in, I was the man. The truth of the matter is that I was ashamed because of our living conditions. On top of that, I struggled with low self-esteem. I spent a lot of time in front of the mirror, so before stepping out of the house, to make sure I was up to the standard of other people's opinions. Insecurity was as much a part of me as my lungs. I spent too much time masking behind all the external things to appear to be someone who I was not. You can wear a mask, but only for so long. I know. I was afraid for people to find out the truth. Lesson number 2. The second lesson I had to unlearn from the hood is that being smart is dumb, and being dumb is smart. One thing my mother always told me was that I was smart and that I could do anything. During my elementary school days, I was always a straight A student. I recall my teacher conversing with my mother about a test the school wanted me to take. On the day of the test, I realized it was to see if I could be skipped to a higher grade, from 3rd to 5th grade. I took the test, and they didn't skip me. To this day, I don't know if it's because I didn't score high enough. All I know is that it planted a seed in my mind that if these people considered me smart enough for me to take the test, then I must be smart. I was the one my teachers always called upon to give various speeches at school assemblies and chose to participate in accelerated programs. When my 5th grade year came to an end, my teacher encouraged and convinced my mom to send me to Sidney Phillips Preparatory School. Basically, it prepares you for high school beginning in the 6th grade. It was considered to be the smart people school where all the white kids went, along with the nerdy black kids. But by the time I finished grade 5, I had unconsciously enrolled in Hood 101, where I learned that being smart is not cool. So I hated their choice to send me there and complained all summer long. I wanted to attend the all-black school just a block away from my house, the school in the hood where all my friends were going. Every time I asked my mother, I got the same short answer: no. When the school year began, I was intentional about not doing well. I learned that doing minimal amounts of work in prep school causes you to be removed from the school. But when you return to public schools in the city, you would still be passed to the next grade. I successfully failed just enough to still pass. My wish was granted. I couldn't return the next year, or I'd have to repeat 6th grade. Not wanting to see me held back, my mother allowed me to go to the school where we lived. And from grade 7 onward, my academics were always mediocre. "Taurus, did you do your homework?" my mother would ask. "We didn't have any." Or, "I did it at school." These were my typical answers. Slowly, I picked up the habit of going to school with no paper, and then it was no pencil, no pen, no books, and then no book bag. And this was all fueled by no desire to learn. So I settled for doing just enough to get by, because I picked up the stupid idea that being smart, intelligent, and bright is acting white. What was cool was making jokes about everything, shooting spitballs across the class, and distracting everyone else from learning. I got an A in these activities. So much potential has gone down the drain and is currently going down the drain in the ghettos of America because of this mindset. There are thousands of engineers, dentists, lawyers, physicians, and accountants in prison, on welfare, or in the grave because they never graduated from Hood 101. I have come to learn that if you do want to make it out of the hood through education, you need to have that Mrs. Obama attitude about school. I never cut class. I loved getting A's. I liked being smart. I liked being on time. I thought being smart is cooler than anything in the world. Michelle Obama. Lesson number 3. When you're angry with someone, you only have 2 choices: retaliate or medicate. This is the one I most regret learning because it caused so much pain in my life. To retaliate is to make an attack or assault in return for a similar attack. This is advocated as early as elementary school. Kids are quickly told, if someone hits you, you better hit them back. Hurt them if they hurt you, or else you're a punk. You're weak. This idea may seem harmless at first, but it mushrooms into, if they curse you out and talk about your mama, you do the same to them. If she cheats on you, cheat back. If they kill your homeboy, retaliate with a drive-by. Retaliation is certainly the way most of our society thinks, not just the hood. But in my hood, it was the first option. I remember one night I was at a party. We called it the Teen Jam. It was basically a city-sponsored youth party held at a local recreation center. I got into an argument with some dudes from another hood while inside the recreation building. I told some of my boys, and afterwards, it was on and popping. We were ready to fight. When we got outside, we looked for the guys who were talking noise to me. We spotted 2 of them and ran up on them. All of a sudden, one of the guys in their crew pulled out a gun and pointed it at us and said, "What you going to do now, huh? What you gonna do?" Well, he actually said worse than that, but I'm trying to keep this rated PG. That made us all fall back. We all scattered like roaches when the lights come on. A wise lesson I learned from the hood is that the dude with the gun always wins, especially if you don't have one. One of my dudes didn't get that lesson, so he stayed there, running his mouth. They jumped him. They beat him up bad. But thank God, they didn't shoot him. They were in retaliation mode. But if you don't feel right about hurting someone else to deal with your own hurt, you may be more inclined to go to the second option, self-medication. This is an attempt to avoid thinking about your pain. This is done by turning to the pain relievers of liquor, beer, and wine in order to wash your pain away. If that doesn't work, stop by the local street pharmacist and order a bag of marijuana in order to smoke your pain away. And if that doesn't work, try snorting it away. If that doesn't fix it, try sexing it away. Unfortunately, over the years, this way of dealing with hurt and pain has turned many people into crackheads or weedheads and sexaholics or alcoholics or all of the above. Some have even committed suicide. I discovered that anger comes from hurt. Hurt is the feeling you have when you or someone you love is taken advantage of, mistreated, or violated. Since life has many ups and downs and twists and turns, if you live long enough, you will be hurt. I'm not talking about physical pain, but emotional hurt. And it happens to be most painful when someone we love hurts us. I find it very interesting that around the same time I heard and saw my father cursing and kicking my mother down the stairs, I began smoking weed. I was 12 years old and in the 7th grade, no longer attending Phillips Preparatory School. I walked in on 3 of my older cousins and noticed a skinny brown stick with smoke rising from it. It was the first time I'd seen a blunt in real life. My curiosity revved like an engine. Though they tried to persuade me from smoking, I was persistent. They gave in. I inhaled. Unbeknownst to me, that was the beginning of an addiction. Every puff I took deepened my desire for more. And more is what I got. By 8th grade, I was smoking weed at least 2 to 3 times a week. My friends and I would all chip in a few dollars to score a dime bag. One person would bring the swishers. We'd meet at the spot around 6:30 a.m. before school started, so we could get high before class. I would go to school laughing at people when nothing was funny, act extra flirtatious with girls, and be very disrespectful to teachers. Then I started drinking. I would take bottles of alcohol to school that I had stolen from my father's store. During bathroom breaks, the entire class, guys and girls, were passing around bottles of Thunderbird and Wild Irish Rose, getting drunk, while the teacher stood waiting for us. I was also in 8th grade year when I got arrested and sent to the juvenile detention center for stealing from the mall. It was also my 8th grade year when I became fascinated with porn magazines, and I lost my virginity with a girl I barely knew. I was obsessed with impressing my classmates. I had a small-time nickel-and-dime weed hustle going on. I took wads of money to school to flash it, to show off. But one day, it got me embarrassed. One of my classmates noticed some white paper inside the knot of bills and called me out on it. It was actually about 10 $1 bills wrapped around by a $100 bill and $30 in food stamps that I had stolen from my dad's store. By the time I was a freshman in high school, my smoking habits went from bad to worse. I was smoking daily now. Weed, Newports, and Black & Miles stayed in my pockets like lint. While I tried my hand at selling marijuana, the thought of getting locked up for 10 years was not a pleasant one. Plus, I had a scare one time when I was sitting on the curbside at my house and 2 undercover police cars rolled up. I started speed walking toward the back door of the big house and tossed the bags of weed I had for sale into the grass. They called for me, searched me, and found nothing. If they had only looked down, I would have gone to jail. On top of that experience, the discipline it takes to avoid getting high from my own supply was too great. I smoked freely. I smoked before school, during school, after school, and sometimes even before basketball and football practice. That was dumb. I became known among my classmates as a weed head, and to my teachers and coaches, an underachieving waste of potential. But I didn't care, because getting high was my way of dealing with my anger, my hurt, and my pain caused by my father. I was self-medicating. I became cold and callous towards life. I picked up the "it's whatever" attitude about everything. It's that attitude that says, forget class, forget homework, forget school, forget my future, forget life, period. And this same attitude had me feeling the same way about my father. Forget that man, is what I constantly thought to myself and said to my brother and mother. He was hitting on my mama like she was a punching bag and bragging about being undefeated with women and children. It was time for him to be defeated. I was still hurting. I was still angry with him. I was still upset with him. After 2 years of trying to smoke my resentment away, the pain was still present. My freshman year of high school was the lowest and worst year of my life. I did not know that a few puffs at the age of 12 would lead me to a 7-year addiction to weed and alcohol. These habits became the coping mechanisms I used to avoid confronting my father's abuse of my mother. I felt it was time for retaliation. I came to the same conclusion about my father that Ray did about his wife. I wanted to take him out. I don't know exactly what it is between sons and mothers, but I couldn't stand the thought of my mother living the rest of her life with someone who verbally, emotionally, and physically abused her. So I had a plan to kill my father so she could be taken out of her misery. Not only did I have a plan, but my mother had one as well. But her plan was different. She had finally become sick and tired of being sick and tired of him. It was time to do something about our situation. The house was a mess. My young life was a mess. And my future was on the verge of being a mess. Life was depressing for us. It was time for a change. And looking back at it, a change is what I needed, badly. My mother hid her plan from Powell and me until the night it was time to carry it out. I had mixed emotions because I didn't expect what we were about to do. Nevertheless, I was ready to do it. The end of chapter 4 of Set on Fire by Taurus, Montgomery.